Episode 1: The Dripping Umbrella. Lira's world was made of damp concrete, the rumbling heart of London, and the ever-present smell of ozone and forgotten things. She knew every flickering fluorescent light in the Holborn station tunnels, every hollow echo of the last train. Her home was a disused maintenance nook behind a faded Mind the Gap sign. Her blanket a discarded theater curtain still smelling of dust and grease paint. She survived on stolen pasties and the strange, fleeting visions that haunted her. They weren't hallucinations, though she called them that. They were dreams that weren't hers. A flash of a man falling from a skyscraper, the taste of salt water and regret, the overwhelming joy of a first kiss. All would flood her senses without warning, leaving her dizzy and nauseated against the dirty tiles. The worst were the ones that lingered. A shadowy figure with too many teeth that stalked the edges of her vision for hours. A melody that looped incessantly until she thought she'd scream. The night it changed, it was raining topside. The damp seeped down, making the tunnels sweat. Lira, curled in her nook, was hit by a dream so vivid it stole her breath. A library, but the books were made of stained glass and whispered in unison. A woman with silver hair and eyes like storm clouds was searching frantically for a title that kept changing. A feeling of profound, devastating loss. As the dream fragment faded, leaving the acid taste of fear on her tongue, Lira noticed the man. He stood perfectly still on the opposite platform, watching the empty track. He was tall, wore a long coat the color of a moth's wing, and held a sleek, black umbrella. But it wasn't raining underground, and from its tip, a single shimmering droplet gathered and fell, hitting the ground with a soft plink that seemed to silence the distant hum of the city. He turned his head. His eyes weren't looking at the platform. They were looking at her, through the curtain of pipes and darkness that hid her nook. He stepped off the platform, not onto the tracks, but onto the air itself, as if an invisible staircase existed. With 3 long strides, he stood before her. "Lira," he said. His voice was dry, like pages turning. "You see them too, don't you? The cracks in the world." She scrambled back, heart hammering. "Go away." He didn't. He crouched, bringing himself to her eye level. Up close, she saw his face was gaunt, etched with deep lines of exhaustion, but his gaze was fiercely alive. The dream of the whispering library. Powerful, painful. It's leaking through you because you have nowhere to put it. You're a vessel with no lid.
nobody, Lira, he said.
Precisely, he said, a hint of a smile touching his lips. To the world above, you are a ghost. Perfect. My name is Alistair Wraith, and I am here to offer you a choice. You can stay here, and the dreams will keep coming, growing stronger, until one day, one particularly sharp or terrible one fractures your mind for good. He paused, letting the grim prognosis hang in the humid air. Or you can come with me. Learn what you are. Learn to weave the threads of dream before they unravel you. He extended a hand, not to touch her, but in invitation. On his palm, a small, intricate shape flickered into being. A tiny, glowing labyrinth made of light and shadow. It was the most beautiful, impossible thing Lira had ever seen. It was a piece of a dream held perfectly, harmlessly. "The place is called Somnium," Alistair Wraith said softly. "It exists in the folds, and it is the only place for people like us." Lira looked from the luminous labyrinth in his hand to his weary, earnest face. She looked back at her dark nook, at the curtain that smelled of other people's performances. The ghost of the whispering library's loss still echoed in her chest. She had nothing, and this man, with his dripping umbrella and pockets full of starlight, was offering her everything. She took his hand. The world did not spin. The station did not vanish. Instead, Alistair Wraith simply turned and walked towards a solid tiled wall, pulling her with him. Lira braced for impact, but there was none. The tiles parted like a theater curtain, revealing not brick and earth, but a long, sloping path lined with softly glowing stones that pulsed like sleeping hearts. The air changed, smelling of old paper, ozone, and something sweet, like forgotten childhood candy. He led her down, the wall sealing shut behind them, cutting off the world of trains and concrete forever. The path opened into a vast, impossible cavern, not of rock, but of shifting, translucent layers like stacked cobwebs or mist. Within these layers, scenes flickered. A sun-drenched meadow that was there 1 second and gone the next. A grand ballroom frozen mid-waltz. A stormy sea captured in a single furious wave. These were the folds, pockets of reality woven from persistent, powerful dreams. And nestled among them, connected by delicate, arching bridges of what looked like solidified moonbeam, was Somnium. It was not one building, but a cluster of structures that defied logic. A tower that seemed to be made of living, growing books. A greenhouse glowing with bioluminescent plants. A domed hall that reflected the dream scenes around it like a multifaceted jewel. Lights twinkled in windows, and dark, graceful shapes, were they birds? Thoughts? Soared between the spires. Lira stopped breathing. This was magic. Not the fuzzy, painful intrusions she knew, but magic with form, with purpose, with a home. Alistair Wraith squeezed her hand gently. "Welcome," he said, "to the last refuge for the awake in a world that is sleepwalking. Your first lesson begins now. Trust nothing here to be exactly as it seems, including, especially, your own eyes." As they crossed the first bridge, Lira felt a new sensation. Not an invading dream, but a gentle pull, a humming in her blood that seemed to resonate with the very stones of Somnium. It felt, for the first time in her 16 years, like coming home. But from a high window in the book tower, a pair of cold, observant eyes watched their approach. And in the deepest, oldest fold, the one that looked like a forgotten cathedral, something that had been dreaming for a very, very long time, stirred. End of Episode 1. Episode 2. The Whispering Library and the Grey Gambit. Somnium was a symphony of controlled chaos. Lira was given a small, circular room in the perch, the student dormitory, which was nestled in the crook of a giant, petrified tree that, according to her guide, a brisk girl named Lira with hair the color of rust, was dreamed into existence by a druid in the 12th century. The room's walls were warm wood that occasionally grew tiny, scentless flowers if she felt particularly happy. Her guide, Lira, was a legacy, a third-generation Dreamweaver, with the confidence that came from being born into this world. She explained the basics as they navigated the ever-shifting corridors. The folds are stable dream residue. They're the foundation. But new dreams are always bubbling up from the waking world. Strong ones, traumatic ones, beautiful ones. They can create new folds or they can become problematic. That's what weavers do. We tend them, calm them, sometimes unravel them. The dreams I saw, they were problematic? Lira asked, struggling to keep up both physically and mentally. Leaks, Lira said simply. You're a natural receiver, untrained, like a radio picking up every station at once. Headmaster Wraith has a knack for finding those about to short-circuit. Headmaster Wraith, the man with the dripping umbrella, was in charge. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. Lira's classes were nothing like any school she'd ever imagined, which, to be fair, was based on TV shows glimpsed through shop windows. Onerology was taught by a frail, ancient woman named Professor Phantasma, who slept in a glass coffin at the front of the class and lectured from within her own lucid dreams, which were projected on the walls. Weaving theory was with Alistair Wraith himself, intense, demanding, focusing on the texture and emotional valence of dream threads. Morphology of the fold was like surreal geography, mapping the ever-changing landscape of their home. But it was practical application that was her crucible. Held in the chamber of waking sleep, a vast, gray, neutral space designed to have no distinctive features of its own, students learned to summon and shape dream stuff. Lira could conjure brilliant, fluttering butterflies made of joyful memory. Another boy, Kale, a brooding, quiet type with a scar over one eyebrow, could solidify threads into tough, resilient ropes. Lira, when prodded by the instructor, a stern man named Professor Boreal, could only manage faint, gray mist that smelled of loneliness and evaporated instantly. Snickers echoed. "Ghost Lira," someone muttered, the familiar, crushing weight of being less than settled on her. Her only solace became the whispering library, the very one from her vision. It was a fold all to itself, accessed through a small, ordinary-looking door in the main hall. Inside, it was cavernous, breathtaking. Stained glass books lined shelves that stretched into infinity. They did whisper, snatches of stories, recipes, secrets, laments. The librarian, a tall, elegant automaton made of polished brass and etched glass named Codex, glided silently between the stacks. And there, often tucked in a nook by a window that looked out onto a perpetual sunset, was the woman from her dream, head archivist Lira. The similarity of their names made Lira's heart skip. Her hair was indeed silver, her eyes storm gray and perpetually sad. Lira visited daily, drawn by a compunction she didn't understand. She didn't dare speak to the archivist, but she felt a strange kinship. She started to notice things. The archivist was always searching, her fingers trailing over spines with a desperate urgency. And the library itself. Sometimes, the whispers would rise to a panicked susurrus, and the stained glass images in the books would flicker and distort, showing brief, terrifying glimpses of a spreading, inky blackness. One afternoon, after a particularly humiliating practical where her mist had turned into a brief shower of pathetic, gray tears, Lira fled to the library. She found Archivist Lira not at her nook, but in a disused lower stack, standing perfectly still before a blank stretch of wall, trembling. "Archivist!"
Lira ventured softly.
Lira jumped, turning eyes wide with fear that slowly softened into recognition. "The new receiver. Lira, isn't it? You know me? A library knows all who enter its dream," Lira said, her voice melodic but strained. "And you have felt this library's distress. In your sleep." "It was my leak," Lira said, surprised. "The one that brought me here." "Not a leak," Lira whispered, stepping closer. "A cry for help." She gestured to the blank wall. "There was a door here. It led to the Codex Primordial, the first dream text, the core from which this library grew. Contained the original narratives, the pure stories before they were interpreted, dreamed, and redreamed. It is gone. The door, the Codex, stolen. And with it, the library's heart is failing. The whispers are becoming chaos. The folds it helps stabilize are growing unstable. The gravity of it hit Lira. This was the profound loss she had felt. Who would steal it? Someone who understands the power of an original story, Lira said, her gaze piercing. To control a story is to control all its dreams. And to control dreams. She left the thought hanging. Headmaster Wraith believes it is an inside job, a weaver of great skill. Her eyes drifted to the high window of the library, which looked towards the main academy. Trust is a fragile thing here, Lira. Be careful who you weave with. That evening, Lira was summoned to Alistair Wraith's study. It was a room that felt like the inside of a clock, all ticking gears made of faint light and shifting shadows. Wraith looked more tired than ever. "Progress is slow," he said without preamble, not unkindly. "I'm trying," Lira said, defiance and shame mixing in her gut. "I know. Not all weavers are made for simple conjuring. Your strength, I believe, is not in creation, but in perception. You see the dreams others miss. You feel their roots." He leaned forward. "Archivist Lira tells me you are drawn to the library's malady. I have a task for you, an unorthodox lesson." He explained the Grey Gambit, a dangerous, advanced technique where a weaver doesn't summon a new dream, but instead steps fully into the emotional and sensory landscape of an existing, powerful dream. In this case, the residual injury in the library. It was like becoming a detective inside a trauma. "It is the only way to find the imprint of the thief, to see what the library saw," Wraith said. "But it is perilous. You could lose yourself in the library's grief, become just another whisper on the shelf. You must anchor yourself to a single, powerful memory of your own." Lira, desperate to prove she was more than Ghost Lira, to help the kind, sad archivist, agreed. The next night, in the very spot where the door had vanished, with Archivist Lira and Headmaster Wraith as anchors in the waking world, Lira performed the gambit. She focused on her only truly happy memory, a vague, warm sensation of being held by her mother, the scent of vanilla and jasmine, a lullaby without words. She held that feeling like a lifeline and reached out with her mind towards the library's wound. The world dissolved. She was not in the library. She was the library. She felt the agony of the missing codex like a phantom limb. She felt the chaos of a million unmoored stories screaming in terror. And through the pain, she saw it. Not a person, but a presence. A shadowy, elegant figure, not stealing the codex, but unraveling it with delicate, cruel precision, pulling its fundamental threads out of reality itself. And as the figure worked, Lira felt a second, familiar presence nearby, not acting, but observing. A cold, calculated, observant watchfulness she recognized from her first day. The vision was suddenly pierced by a new, invasive signal, a raw, violent, and fresh dream leak, crashing into the library's fragile space from the waking world. It was a dream of pure, animalistic terror and rage. The shockwave blasted Lira out of the Grey Gambit. She gasped back into her body, collapsing on the library floor. Headmaster Wraith caught her. "What did you see?" But Lira, her mind reeling, could only stammer one thing, her eyes wide with the horror of two realizations. "The thief! They didn't take it. They unmade it." She clutched his arm. "And the new leak, it's coming from right above us, in London, and it's a nightmare that's waking up." End of Episode 2. Episode 3, The Boy in the Burning Tower. The aftermath of the Grey Gambit was a splitting headache and a profound sense of violation. The library's grief had seeped into Lyra's bones. Worse was the chilling clarity of her vision. The thief wasn't a burglar, but a deconstructor. They hadn't wanted the Codex Primordial. They wanted it not to exist. Before she could fully convey this to Wraith, the new, violent dream leak demanded all attention. Its signal was a screaming siren in the minds of every trained receiver at Somnium, a rending in progress. A dream so powerful and toxic it was tearing a hole between the waking world and the dreamscape, threatening to create a cancerous, unstable fold or worse, spill its contents into reality. "It's centered in Bloomsbury," Professor Boreal announced grimly in the hastily assembled warp chamber. A room lined with maps of London that shimmered and changed. A high-rise residential tower. "The dreamer is in immense distress." Wraith's face was granite. "A rending of this magnitude. It's a beacon. And a weapon. It will draw every parasitic thought form and psychic scavenger for miles. We contain it or we have a catastrophe. His eyes swept the senior students and faculty. Lira, you're with me. Your sensitivity may be the only way to navigate the core of the disturbance without being torn apart. Alara looked shocked. Kale, the brooding boy, merely watched with narrowed eyes. Lira felt a thrill of terror and purpose. They warped not through the tunnels, but via a rapid, nauseating descent through a temporary fold that felt like being squeezed through a storm cloud. One moment they were in Somnium's calm. The next they were in a sweltering, dimly lit concrete stairwell that reeked of burnt wiring and panic. The air vibrated with palpable fear. Walls seemed to breathe. The fluorescent lights flickered with images of licking flames and falling bodies. The dreamer's psyche is superimposing on reality, Wraith whispered. His umbrella now held like a divining rod, its tip glowing a soft blue. Stay close. Do not engage any figments directly. Your mind will make them real. They climbed. The higher they went, the more intense the dream bleed became. Photographs on residents' doors melted into screaming faces. The sound of a television behind one door was a continuous, looping news report of the tower's inevitable collapse. From another apartment, a child's desperate sobbing echoed. But when Wraith forced the door open, the room was empty, save for a rocking chair moving by itself. On the 14th floor, they found the source. Apartment 14B. The door was cold to the touch, frost spiderwebbing across its surface, while the air around it shimmered with heat haze. A paradox of fear, burning and freezing at once. Wraith placed a hand on the door, his brow furrowed in concentration. The dreamer is a boy. His name is Leo. He's trapped in a loop. The fire that killed his family is about to happen, over and over. But it's not a memory. It's a premonition he's having in his sleep, so powerful it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The dream is causing the psychic conditions for a real fire. He looked at Lira. I need to weave a counter-dream, a bubble of safety and calm to insulate the area and dampen the rending. But to do that, I need to find the core thread of the nightmare, the trigger. You must go in. You're less rigidly trained, your psyche is more fluid. You can swim in this without breaking it further. Find Leo. Find what he's most afraid of within the fear. The order was insane. Go into a waking nightmare. Lira wanted to refuse, but she saw the strain on Wraith's face, saw the walls of the corridor begin to blister with dream flame. She nodded. He touched his umbrella to the door, and it dissolved into shimmering mist. Lira stepped through into hell. Apartment 14B was a war zone between two dreams. The living room was a frozen tableau of a perfect, sunny afternoon. A birthday cake on the table, balloons, forever stuck in time. But encroaching on this scene, from the hallway and kitchen, was roaring, impossibly hot fire that gave off no heat, only waves of terror. And in the center, curled under the birthday table, was a boy of about 10, wearing dinosaur pajamas. Leo! His eyes were wide open, staring at nothing, his body shaking violently. Leo, Lira said softly, approaching slowly, trying to project the memory of safety she'd used as her anchor. Vanilla, Jasmine, it's not real. It's always real, the boy whispered, his voice echoing from the walls, the fire, the frozen cake. It happens every night. I see the wire in the wall. I see it spark. I scream, but no one hears. They're in the kitchen, laughing. Then the smoke, and they stop laughing.
Lira understood.
The terror wasn't just of the fire. It was of the moment before. The perfect, happy moment he couldn't save. The nightmare was his guilt, given form. She knelt, ignoring the phantom flames licking at her legs. It hasn't happened yet, Leo. This is now. You're dreaming before it happens. You can change the dream. I try, he sobbed, but I always look at the clock. And when the clock hits 3:17, it starts. Lyra's eyes snapped to the wall clock in the frozen living room scene. His hands were stuck at 3:16. 1 minute to doom, the central thread. Outside, she could feel Wraith's powerful, calming weave pushing against the nightmare, holding it back. But it was a stalemate. The clock was the linchpin. An idea, desperate and instinctual, came to her. She wasn't good at conjuring butterflies or ropes, but she was a receiver. What if she didn't create a new dream, but redirected one? Focusing past the terror, she reached out with her mind, not into the waking world, but into the adjacent dreamscape, into the faint, lingering echoes of other, gentler dreams in the building. She found one. An old woman dreaming of her garden in spring. The simple, potent joy of a blooming crocus. Lira didn't take it. She tugged on its thread, pulling a wisp of its essence. The vivid, calming yellow of the flower, the smell of damp earth, into Leo's nightmare. It was a tiny intrusion. A single, glowing yellow crocus pushed its way through the carpet under the birthday table. Leo's eyes flickered to it. The shaking lessened, just a fraction. Encouraged, Lira searched again. She found a student dreaming of acing an exam, the thrill of triumph. She pulled a silver thread of that confidence into the room. Then a baby dreaming of its mother's heartbeat, a deep, rhythmic pulse of safety. Slowly, delicately, Lira began to patch Leo's nightmare with scraps of other people's good dreams. She wasn't a weaver building something new. She was a dream tailor, mending a torn tapestry with borrowed thread. A shield of confidence appeared around the table. The rhythm of safety pulsed through the air, countering the erratic scream of the fire. The clock's second hand, which had begun a jerky movement towards 3:17, slowed. "Look at me, Leo," Lira said, her voice now woven with the threads of calm she was importing. "Don't look at the clock. Look at the flower. It's yours. It's real." With a monumental effort, the boy tore his gaze from the clock and looked at the crocus. The moment he did, the frozen scene of the birthday party moved. The balloons drifted, the icing on the cake glistened, and the fire halted its advance. Outside, sensing the shift, Wraith struck. Lira felt a wave of profound, orchestrated calm flood the apartment. A masterfully woven dream of safety, of firefighters already arriving, of a tragedy averted. The nightmare shattered like glass. The fire vanished. The apartment was just an apartment, clean, quiet, and still. Morning light filtered through the blinds. On the sofa, Leo slept peacefully, a small smile on his face. The rending was over. Exhausted, Lira stumbled out into the hall. Wraith was leaning against the wall, pale but smiling. "Dream tailoring," he breathed. "Instinctive, reckless, and brilliant. No one has done that in centuries." He looked at her with newfound respect. "You didn't fight his dream. You curated it." But Lyra's triumph was short-lived. As they warped back to Somnium, the lingering echo of the thief's presence from the library mingled in her mind with the violent signature of Leo's manufactured nightmare. Both had the same feeling of something being fundamentally twisted. And as they materialized in the warp chamber, they were met by a furious Professor Boreal and a crowd of worried faculty. Boreal's finger was pointed directly at Lira. "While you were playing hero headmaster, we finished the resonance analysis on the rending. That wasn't a natural nightmare. It was engineered. Its psychic signature is a perfect match for the disruption caused by the theft of the Codex Primordial." His cold eyes locked onto Lira, and the only new, untrained, and anomalously powerful psychic signature in Somnium, one that just happened to be at the scene of both events, is hers. The room went silent. All eyes turned to Lira. Even Lira took a step back. Kale watched, unreadable. Wraith stepped between Lira and the accusing crowd, his voice thunderous. That is a profound and dangerous accusation, Boreal. It's a logical conclusion. Boreal shot back. She can't weave simple constructs, yet she tailored a rending? Convenient. She was the last to see the library's theft. She's an unknown variable. Lira stood frozen, the vindication of saving Leo evaporating, replaced by the icy dread of being trapped in a far more terrifying nightmare, one of suspicion and betrayal. She looked past her accusers to the high window of the chamber. There, leaning against the frame, observing the chaos with detached interest, was the owner of the cold, calculative gaze she'd felt in the library vision. It was Kale, and as their eyes met, he didn't look away. He simply gave her the faintest, most unsettling smile. End of Episode 3. Episode 4, The Fractured Circle. The accusation hung in the air of Somnium like a poisonous fog. Lira was not imprisoned, Headmaster Wraith's authority saw to that, but she was sequestered. Her movements were restricted. Her classes attended under the watchful eye of Professor Boreal or one of his stern prefects. The friendly curiosity from other students had curdled into wary suspicion or outright hostility. Ghost Lira was now rending Lira. Only Lira, driven more by a sense of fair play than belief, offered hesitant support. "It doesn't make sense," she muttered during a supervised walk to honorology. "If you were that powerful, you'd be better at basic weaving. Boreal's just paranoid. Always has been." But the isolation was crushing. Lira spent her free hours in the only place that still felt neutral. A small, forgotten balcony overlooking the font of Mnemosyne, a spring whose waters were said to hold the echo of every dream ever dreamed. It was there, 2 days after the accusation, that Kale found her. He moved silently, like a shadow detaching itself from the wall. Lira tensed, remembering his smile in the warp chamber. "You're not very good at hiding," he said, his voice low. "I'm not hiding. I'm confined," she retorted. "A technicality." He leaned on the balcony rail, looking down at the shimmering waters. "What you did in the tower, it wasn't weaving. It was something else. Older. You were watching the hearing. You think I'm the thief." Kale turned his scarred profile towards her. "I think Boreal is an idiot playing politics. The thief is a master. You're an interesting mess." He paused. "The library's memory." You felt a second presence. "An observer." Lyra's breath hitched. She hadn't told anyone that detail, not even Wraith. "How do you know that?" "Because I felt it too," he said flatly. "I was in the lower stacks that night, researching. I'm not a legacy like Lira. I'm a foundling like you. Only I was found in a fold that was collapsing. A dream of a shipwreck. It left me attuned to ripples, to observers in the dark." He finally looked at her, his eyes a sharp, flinty gray. "The observer in the library wasn't you. And it wasn't the thief. It was a third party. Someone who wanted to watch the codex be unmade. The revelation was a shock." "Who?" Kale shrugged. "That's the question. But your little stunt in the tower proved something. You're a catalyst. The real thief and this observer will be watching you now. You draw things into the light, Lira, even if you get burned in the process." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because we're the same," he said, a hint of bitterness in his voice. "We don't fit their neat boxes. Legacies have family weaves, traditions. We have scars and instincts. And right now, Somnium is sick. The library is bleeding. The rending was an attack. Wraith is stretched too thin playing diplomat. We need to find the sickness ourselves. He proposed a pact, an unofficial, unsanctioned investigation. He had knowledge of the older, less traveled parts of Somnium and the folds. She had the raw, sensitive perception. Together, they could look where the faculty wouldn't. Desperate for action and allies, Lira agreed. Their first target was the Obsidian Vault, the repository for quarantined dreams, nightmares, psychic hazards, and corrupted weaves deemed too dangerous to study openly. Kale believed if someone were experimenting with unmaking dream texts or engineering rendings, traces might be found there. Getting in required a diversion. During a practical exam in the Chamber of Waking Sleep, Lira, under Kale's instruction, deliberately fumbled a simple weaving exercise in a spectacular way, causing a minor, noisy eruption of chaotic gray mist that drew all supervisory attention. In the confusion, Kale, who had a knack for blending into shadows, slipped away. He met her later at the font, his expression grim. I got in. The security weaves are old, predictable. And I found something. He described a sealed capsule within the vault, labeled Cane Fragment, Do Not Weave. The capsule was empty. The log slate next to it showed one recent access signature, digitally scrubbed. But in the physical dust on the capsule's pedestal, Kale had found a partial footprint. The impression of a distinctive, elegant shoe sole, the kind worn by senior faculty and head students. The Cane Fragment, Kale explained, his voice hushed. It's a piece of the first recorded human nightmare, the dream of fratricide.
Pure, archetypal malice.
If someone extracted it and combined it with the unmade threads of the Codex Primordial, they could theoretically weave a new narrative, one of pure corruption. The pieces began to form a terrifying picture. The thief wasn't just destroying. They were collecting, unmaking the original story, and now possessing a seed of the original nightmare. To create what? Their investigation was interrupted by a summons. Archivist Lira wanted to see Lira in the Whispering Library. Alone. The library was worse. The whispers were now a constant, low groan of pain. Stained glass images were permanently darkened. Lira looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Lira, she said, clutching Lira's hands. Her own were ice cold. You must stop looking. You and the foundling boy. How did you? The library sees. It whispers to me. You are drawing their attention. The ones in the shadows. Lyra's storm-gray eyes were frantic. The observer you felt. They are not of Somnium. Not truly. They are a somniant. The word meant nothing to Lira. A dream eater, Lira whispered, the term dripping with ancient dread. A being not born, but crystallized from the accumulated envy and hunger of dreamers who can never create. They are parasites on the dreamscape. They can't weave. They can only consume and corrupt the weaves of others. If one has infiltrated us, it is because it has a patron, a weaver who has made a pact. Lira felt the world tilt. A traitor within Somnium working with a psychic parasite. Who? Lyra's gaze drifted upwards, through the library's crystal dome, towards the highest spire of the main academy, the Spire of Serenity, where the senior faculty and the headmaster had their private studies and quarters. The threads of power here are old and tightly wound, Lira. Trust no one who offers you a clear answer. The truth is always a tangled knot. Just then, Codex, the brass and glass librarian, glided up. It emitted a series of soft, chiming notes. Lira paled further. The library has finished its own analysis, she translated, her voice hollow, of the resonance in the tower. It confirms the signature matches the Codex theft, but it has isolated a secondary modulating frequency, a signature that was guiding the rending. shaping it. She looked at Lira, pity and fear in her eyes. The secondary signature is a perfect match for the protective weave placed around you when you first arrived. The one only one person could have cast. Lyra's blood ran cold. The bubble of safety Wraith had woven around her nook in the underground. The unique resonance of his magic. Headmaster Alistair Wraith. The man who found her. The man who believed in her. The man who was, according to the library's whispering heart, implicated in engineering the very nightmare she had stopped. Before she could process this, the library doors burst open. Professor Boreal marched in, flanked by two hulking senior students acting as prefects. His face was triumphant. "Lira of the Nook," he declared, his voice echoing in the pained silence. "By the authority of the Circle of Elders, you are hereby placed under full arrest for treason against Somnium, theft of the Codex Primordial, and the attempted creation of a rending. Evidence has been presented that is incontrovertible." He held up a small, glowing crystal, a memory catcher. Within it, a scene played out. A shadowy figure with Lyra's slight build and wild hair, standing before the blank wall in the library, performing a complex, dark, unraveling weave. The figure turned, and the face, though blurred by artistic malice, was unmistakably hers. It was a fabrication, perfect, damning dream forgery. As Boreal's prefects moved to grab her, Lyra's eyes shot to the high library window. Kale was there watching, but this time his face showed no smile, only stark alarm. He met her gaze and gave a sharp, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Don't resist." As they led her away, the last thing she heard was Archivist Lyra's desperate, whispered words, carried on a pained library sigh. "Find the knot's end, child. It is in the first dream." And Lira knew with absolute certainty that she was not being led to a cell. She was being led into a trap. And the only person who might have been able to help her was the one person the evidence now pointed to as the architect of it all. End of Episode 4. Episode 5. The Unwoven Cell and the First Dream. Lira was not taken to a conventional cell. Somnium had no bars of iron. Instead, she was escorted to the Chamber of Stillness, a place of absolute sensory deprivation designed to calm volatile weavers. It was a perfect, featureless white sphere floating in a void of gray mist. Here, there was nothing to perceive, nothing to dream from. It was a prison for the mind. As the entrance sealed behind her, leaving her in silent, blinding whiteness, panic threatened to consume her. The accusations replayed in a loop. Boreal's triumph, the forged memory catcher, Lyra's devastating implication about Wraith. She was alone, powerless, and framed. But the panic sparked a memory, Kale's sharp headshake. "Don't resist." And Lyra's final, cryptic whisper, "Find the knot's end. It is in the first dream." The first dream. What did that mean? Her first dream? Somnium's first dream? The Codex Primordial was the first story. Was that the knot? In the overwhelming stillness, her mind, deprived of external input, turned inward. She focused on the only concrete clue she had, the feel of the secondary signature from the rending, the one matching Wraith's protective weave. She had felt it, intimately, when she was inside Leo's nightmare. She had felt its texture calm, authoritative, but with a strand of something else. A hidden filament like a single black thread in a silver tapestry. A note of profound weariness, of a burden carried too long. She replayed the gray gambit in the library. The thief's presence, elegant, cruel, precise. Did it feel like Wraith? The core of it, the act of unraveling, felt clinical, passionless. But the observer, the somniant that Lyra described, that felt cold, hungry, alien. What if Lyra's clue wasn't an accusation, but a warning? What if the knot was that Wraith's weave had been compromised, used without his knowledge? The black thread, her train of thought was shattered by a distortion in the whiteness. A patch of the wall opposite her shimmered, like heat haze, and a figure stepped through as if the wall were a curtain. It was Kale. He held a finger to his lips. In his other hand, he held a small, intricate device made of copper wire and dreaming crystal, a oniric labyrinth, a portable, temporary fold generator. It creates a bubble of stable dream space around us, he whispered, his voice oddly muffled by the sphere. To their monitors, you're still here, catatonic. We have 10 minutes. How did you find me?
Lira bileted.
I told you, I'm good with ripples. The stillness creates a very specific kind of non-ripple. It's easy to find if you know what to look for. He looked at her intently. The memory catcher was a forgery, a good one. It takes a master weaver to create a false memory that convincing. Boreal? Kale snorted. Boreal couldn't weave a convincing excuse. No, this is the work of the observer, the Somnium's patron. They're moving to silence you because you're getting close. Close to what?
Lira demanded.
All I have are questions. You identified the secondary signature in the rending. You felt the observer in the library. And most importantly, you exist. Kale's flinty eyes were serious. You're an anomaly, Lira, a receiver of unprecedented strength with no history. Wraith didn't just find you. He was drawn to you, like a magnet. Why? The question hung in the artificial air. Lira had no answer. Lyra said to find the knot's end in the first dream, Lira said. The Codex Primordial is gone. Unmade. Not gone, Kale corrected. Unwoven. Dream stuff can't be destroyed, only transformed or dispersed. Its essence is somewhere. And a first dream, Somnium itself is built on one. The founder's dream. The legend was taught in morphology. Somnium's central keep, the oldest part, was not built in a fold. It was the fold, the crystallized dream of its founder, Ethelred the Awake, who first learned to walk in the dreamscape 1,000 years ago. His private sanctum is in the heart of the spire, Kale said, sealed since his death. It's the one place untouched, unchanged, the original blueprint. If there's an answer, it's there. It'll be guarded, warded, Lira said, by the most powerful weaves in existence, keyed to bloodline or to resonance. Kale looked at her. Wraith is a direct descendant of Ethelred. That's why he's headmaster. The ward's answer to his blood, or to a psychic signature identical to his. The black thread in the silver tapestry. The compromised weave. You think someone copied his resonance? Used it to frame him and access places they shouldn't. I think we have 9 minutes left and a terrible plan, Kale said, a grim smile touching his lips. The prefects are changing guard. Boreal is presenting his evidence to the circle of elders. Wraith will be there defending you. It's our only window. The risk was monumental. If they were caught, Kale would join her in captivity, and their guilt would be sealed. But staying meant being a pawn until the real conspirators decided to discard her. Let's go, Lira said. Kale activated the labyrinth. The white sphere around them dissolved into a swirling tunnel of muted color and sound, a covert, unstable warp path he had pre-programmed. Felt like falling through a kaleidoscope. They emerged, dizzy and disoriented, in a dusty, silent antechamber at the base of the Spire of Serenity. The air here was thick, old, heavy with dormant power. Before them was a simple oak door, devoid of handle or keyhole. It was inscribed with a single, glowing rune that pulsed with a slow, ancient rhythm. The ward of Ethelred, Kale whispered. Touch it. Pour your awareness into it. Not to push, but to listen. If you're connected to this, it will know. Lira, her heart hammering against her ribs, stepped forward. She placed her palm flat on the cold wood, right over the glowing rune. She closed her eyes, shutting out the fear, and did as Kale said. She reached out with the part of her that heard dreams, that felt leaks. She offered not a password, but a question. Who am I? For a moment, nothing. Then, a vibration. The rune flared, not with rejection, but with a complex, cascading light. Images, sensations, flooded her mind. Not her own. A man with Wraith's tired eyes but a fiercer smile, standing on a cliff edge, weaving the first stones of Somnium from the dream of a mountain. A woman with silver hair, Lira, but younger, joyful, laughing, her hands full of starlight. A terrible battle against formless shadows, somniance, that ended with a scream of loss. And then, a locking mechanism not of metal but of concept engaging. The ward demanded a key, not of blood, but of recognition. It presented her with a psychic lock shaped like a specific emotional frequency. The exact, unique blend of vanilla, jasmine, and unconditional love that was her only happy memory. The memory she had used as her anchor in the Grey Gambit. How? Her mind reeled. This ward was centuries old. It knew her mother's scent. With a trembling will, she poured that memory into the lock. The rune blazed with white light. The oak door didn't open. It unfolded, its matter dissolving into motes of golden dream stuff that swirled away, revealing the sanctum. It was not a room. It was a memory held in perfect stasis. They stood on a windswept cliff under a sky churning with dream stuff. In the center was a simple stone hearth where a fire of pure white flame burned silently. Around it, frozen in a moment of conversation, were three semi-transparent figures. Ethelred, proud, fierce, the silver-haired woman, her face now clearly archivist Lira, but centuries younger, and a third figure, tall, scholarly, with a kind face and clever hands. The first circle, Kale breathed in awe. Ethelred, Lira of the Lakes, and Corvus, the first head archivist, the greatest weaver of his age. He vanished. They said he went mad, consumed by his research into dream origins. Lira stepped towards the frozen triad. As she approached the hearth, the white flame pulsed. Above it, suspended in the air, was not a book, but a shimmering, intricate knot of intertwined light, silver, gold, and a single fraying strand of black. The knot, Lira murmured. She reached out. The moment her fingers neared the knot, the frozen memory erupted into motion. It is a cancer, Corvus, Ethelred was shouting, his voice full of thunder. This somniant you describe, it is not a natural thing. You cannot treat with it. Corvus, the scholar, looked pained but resolute. It is a form of life, Ethelred, born of dreamers' hunger. I can teach it. I can give it purpose. We can understand the nature of dreams by understanding what feeds on them. Lira placed a hand on Ethelred's arm. Brother, please. His heart is true. He seeks knowledge, not power. The heart may be true, but the path is shadowed. Ethelred roared. He gestured to the knot of light floating between them. Our bond, the triad weave that founded Somnium. Do you not feel the strain? Your obsession pulls at the black thread. Lira looked. In the memory knot, the black thread was small, contained. But as she watched the argument, it twitched, as if alive. Corvus turned away, hurt. You cling to purity and lose the future. I will prove it to you. I will bring you understanding. He strode from the sanctum. The memory froze again, then fast-forwarded. The scene grew dark. Corvus returned, but he was changed. His eyes held a hollow, hungry light. Behind him, a patch of shadow clung too tightly, moving with him. "I have given it a name," Corvus whispered, his voice echoing. "I have given it a taste of purpose. It hungers for more, for the source." "What have you done?" Lyra cried, her voice full of horror. "What was necessary?" Corvus shot back. "The Codex, the first story, it holds the pattern. The Somniant can learn to weave its own reality, but it needs the pattern. Give it to me." A battle ensued, not of physical blows, but of devastating weaves that scarred the very dream stuff of the sanctum. Ethelred and Lyra fought to subdue their friend, to contain the parasitic somniant that had now fused with his shadow. In a final, desperate act, as Corvus tried to unravel the triad, not itself to steal its power, Ethelred performed a catastrophic weave. He didn't attack Corvus. He fractured him. The memory showed Corvus screaming, his form splitting. The essence of the man, his knowledge, his love for his friends, was torn from the corrupted part bonded to the somniant. The good essence was sealed away into a deep, healing sleep within the foundational folds of Somnium. The corrupted half, the Weaver-Somniant hybrid, was banished into the outer darkness of the dreamscape. But as it was cast out, it shrieked a promise. "I will return for what is mine. The key will wake. The pattern will be unmade and remade." The memory ended. The sanctum was still. The knot above the hearth glowed, its black thread now more prominent, throbbing faintly.
Lira understood.
The key was her unique resonance which matched the lock on this door. She was a descendant, not of Ethelred, but of Corvus. Her happy memory, her mother's scent. It was a psychic heirloom, passed down through a hidden bloodline, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And the conspirator, the thief, the observer's patron, was the corrupted half of Corvus. Returned. It hadn't stolen the Codex Primordial to destroy it. It had taken the original pattern to combine it with the Cain fragment, the first nightmare, to weave a new, dark reality where somniants were the masters and human dreamers were the cattle. The black thread in Wraith's weave. It was a trace of the corruption, a sleeper agent placed long ago, perhaps when Wraith himself was young. The real traitor wasn't in the circle of elders. It was the circle's original fallen founder. And he had been using Boreal's ambition and suspicion, and Wraith's compromised power, to maneuver Lira into position, to be discredited, imprisoned, and then used. The key to unlock what? His own sealed away, good half? To complete himself? A new, deeper horror dawned on Lira. Her mother, her disappearance. Was it part of this? Had she been hiding Lira from this destiny? A sound echoed from the antechamber, the distinct crackle of a dispelling warp. Their time was up. Kale grabbed her arm. "We have to go. Now." But as they turned to flee the sanctum, the oak door did not reappear. In its place stood a figure, blocking the exit. It was not a prefect. It was not Boreal. It was Alistair Wraith. His face was a mask of stormy fury and profound betrayal. In his eyes, the silver light of his power swirled with faint, ugly tendrils of black. "Lira," he said, his voice like grinding stone. The air around him vibrated with barely contained, corrupted power. "You have been led into the one place you should never have come. You have just armed our enemy with everything he needs." He raised a hand, and the very dream stuff of the sanctum began to twist in response to his command. "And now," Headmaster Wraith said, the black threads in his eyes seeming to pulse, "you have forced my hand." Episode 6. The Corrupted Weave. The dream stuff of Ethelred's sanctum, once a still, sacred memory, now churned like a storm-tossed sea in response to Alistair Wraith's raised hand. The frozen images of the first circle shimmered and warped. The white flame in the hearth guttered, its light fighting against a creeping, inky darkness that seeped from the headmaster's shadow. Lira and Kale stood frozen, caught between the ghost of the past and the living, breathing threat in the doorway. The accusation in Wraith's voice was a physical blow. "I haven't armed anyone," Lira protested, her voice echoing strangely in the buckling space. "We came to find the truth. The thief is Corvus, the corrupted half. He's inside your weaves." A black thread, a spasm of pain crossed Wraith's face. For a second, the silver in his eyes brightened, pushing back the black tendrils. "I know," he gritted out, the words clearly costing him immense effort. "I have felt its influence, a slow poison in the foundation of my power for decades, since my apprenticeship." His hand trembled but did not lower. "But you don't understand. This sanctum isn't just a memory. It's a seal. And you, with your blood, your resonance, you've just amplified its signal. You've shouted our location into the darkness." As if on cue, the walls of the sanctum began to bleed. Not blood, but a viscous, shadowy substance that dripped upwards, defying gravity, and gathered on the ceiling, forming a swirling, inverted pool of pure black. A low, psychic hum filled the air, the sound of a deep, ancient hunger. "The somniant," Kale whispered, his usual cool composure shattered by raw dread. "It's not just an observer. It's here. It's always been here," Wraith corrected, his voice strained. "Dormant, latent in the corruption, waiting for the key to turn." He finally looked directly at Lira, and in that look, she saw not the fury of a traitor, but the desperate anguish of a guardian who had failed. "Your mother, she was Corvus's last true descendant in the direct line. She hid you in the waking world, buried your resonance under years of neglect and concrete, hoping the line would end, that the key would rust shut. I found you not because I was looking for a weapon, Lira. I found you because the corruption in me ached for you. It led me straight to you. The revelation was a vortex, sucking in all her confusion and giving it a terrible, logical shape. Her mother's disappearance wasn't an accident. She had been hiding them, and Wraith, trying to protect her, had instead become the beacon that led the enemy to her door. The black pool on the ceiling convulsed. A shape began to form, not Corvus, but the essence of the somniant that had fused with him. It was the absence of form, a living silhouette with too many slender, grasping limbs and a single pulsing eye that was a hole into deeper nothingness, its attention fixed on the triad not still floating above the hearth. "Pattern?" A voice hissed, not in the air, but directly into their minds. It was the sound of pages tearing, of glass shattering under pressure. "Key! Give!" Wraith roared, a sound of pure defiance, and unleashed his weave. But it was a fractured thing. Silver threads of protective, binding power shot from his hands, but woven among them were those same black filaments. The weave struck the forming somniant, and for a moment, it held, a net of light and shadow containing the horror. But the black threads within the net turned, obeying their true master. They began to unravel Wraith's own work from the inside. The headmaster cried out, collapsing to one knee, clenching his head. "It uses my own power against me. I cannot hold it."
Lira yacet, paralizet.
This was a battle of titans, of foundational magic far beyond her dream tailoring. She was a key, not a weapon. Kale, however, moved. He wasn't looking at the somniant or Wraith. His eyes were locked on the memory of the battle between Ethelred and Corvus, still playing in a fragmented loop around the edges of the sanctum. "The fracture!" he shouted over the psychic din. "Ethelred didn't banish the corrupted half. He fractured Corvus and sealed the good half away. The seal is here. The somniant half needs the other half to be whole, to wield the pattern fully. He was right. The corrupted Corvus was a half thing, a parasite riding a broken soul. It had the knowledge, the hunger, the Cain fragment. But to truly remake reality in its image, it needed the innate creative power, the genius-level weaving ability, the humanity of its original self. The somniance I swiveled from the knot to Kale. A tendril of darkness lashed out, faster than thought. Kale dove, but it clipped his shoulder. He screamed, not a sound of physical pain, but of utter, soul-chilling terror, as the tendril siphoned off a fragment of his dream self, a core memory. He crumpled, gasping, his face pale. The attack broke Lira's paralysis. Rage, hot and clear, replaced her fear. This thing was feeding on her only ally. It had hunted her mother. It was using the man who had saved her as a puppet. She didn't know how to fight it, but she knew how to listen. Ignoring the battle, she ran to the stone hearth and thrust her hands towards the triad knot. She didn't try to grab it. She opened herself to it, as she had to Leo's nightmare, as she had to the library's grief. She let the knot's history flood into her. She saw it all not as a memory, but as a living tapestry, the bright, fierce joy of its creation. 3 friends, bonding their souls to build a refuge. The first strain, Corvus's intellectual curiosity curdling into obsession. The slow, insidious introduction of the black thread. The somniant's influence, a whisper in the dark. The agony of the fracture. And then, centuries of stillness, but not emptiness. A faint, steady, golden pulse, buried deep within the knot's core. The sealed-away essence of Corvus's better half, sleeping, dreaming a dream of perfect, penitent stillness. The seal isn't on the door, Lira breathed, understanding dawning. The seal is the knot, and the key isn't just my blood. It's a choice. The somniant, tearing another hole in Wraith's disintegrating net, lunged for her. Its single eye was fixed on the knot in her hands. Lira made the choice. She didn't try to unlock the seal. She didn't try to wield the knot's power. She did the only thing that felt true to her nature, the receiver, the mender, the tailor. She poured her own consciousness, her newfound understanding, her desperate hope, into the golden pulse within the knot. She offered it not a command, but a situation, a report of the current dream. He's back, the shadow you became. He's hurting our home. He has the first story and the first nightmare. He needs you to finish his work. We need you to stop him. For a moment, nothing. Then the golden pulse flared. The triad knot dissolved in her hands. But it did not vanish. It flowed into her, through her, a river of ancient, potent dream stuff. It didn't feel like being possessed. Felt like being completed. Visions that were not her own flashed behind her eyes. Complex weaving patterns, philosophical treatises on dream matter, a deep, abiding love for Lyra and Ethelred, and a crushing, centuries-old guilt. A voice, gentle and immensely weary, spoke in the shared space of her mind. You carry my blood and my burden, child, and you ask me to face my shadow. Yes, Lyra thought back. I can't fight him. You can. I am but a dream of who I was, a memory with a conscience. To face him is to risk being reabsorbed, to become the monster you fear. Then don't face him, Lyra pleaded, the plan forming instinctively. Weave with me, like you wove with Ethelred and Lyra. Let me be your hands. I'll be the needle, you be the thread. A sense of profound, sad approval washed over her. A new triad, the key, the memory, and the consciousness surveyed the crumbling sanctum, the struggling wraith, the wounded Kale. The foundling scarred by shipwrecks. An interesting pattern. Lyra's eyes snapped open. They were no longer just her own eyes. They held the weight of centuries. She looked at the descending somniant, and she did not see a formless horror. She saw a weave, a grotesque, brilliant, and terribly unstable weave of corrupted dream stuff, anchored to a fractured soul. And she knew how to unravel it. She didn't raise her hands. She simply spoke, her voice echoing with a dual timbre, her own and Corvus's. You are a flawed construct. Your central paradox is your hunger. To create your new world, you need the creativity you consumed. But that creativity cannot exist without the empathy you destroyed. Your knot is fraying. The somniant hesitated, its lunge faltering. Her words weren't an attack. They were a diagnosis, and it recognized the voice of its other half. Lyra/Kale's consciousness reached out, not to the monster, but to the black threads still tangled in Wraith's silver net. She spoke to them, the lingering traces of Corvus's original power, now enslaved. You remember the white flame. You remember the laughter on the cliff. That is your home, not the emptiness. With a gentle, irresistible tug, the tug of a master weaver calling his stray threads home, she pulled. The black threads in Wraith's net shuddered, then tore free, flowing away from the somniant and towards Lira. They didn't enter her. They swirled around her, merging with the golden light of the memory Corvus. With each thread that returned, the somniant shrieked, its form becoming less substantial, more chaotic. It was not being destroyed. It was being unmade, its stolen power reclaimed.
No.
The pattern is mine, it screamed, making a final, desperate grab for Lyra's head. But a new net fell upon it, a net of pure, undiluted silver. Alistair Wraith, freed from the internal sabotage, stood tall. His eyes cleared of darkness, burning with fierce, focused light. He bound the weakened somniant completely. The pattern, Wraith said, his voice firm once more, belongs to no one. It simply is. Lira, guided by the memory Corvus, took the final step. She approached the bound, shrieking mass of hunger and shadow. She placed a hand on it, not with anger, but with a profound, sorrowful pity. You are a dream that forgot it was a dream, she whispered. It's time to wake up. She performed the simplest, most complex weave of all. She gifted the somniant the sensation of being full, of being complete, of being at peace. It was a dream tailor's ultimate gift, a perfect, satiating dream. The shrieking stopped. The form dissolved into a shower of harmless, gray ash that evaporated before it hit the floor. The corrupting presence, the observer in the dark, was gone. Only the reclaimed threads of Corvus's power remained, swirling peacefully in the golden light around Lira. Then the light detached itself. It coalesced into the faint, translucent form of a man, the scholar Corvus as he was meant to be. He looked at his hands, then at Wraith, then at Lira, his expression one of infinite regret and gratitude. The debt can never be repaid, the memory said, his voice already fading. But the foundation is clean. Protect the new triad, Alistair. Their knot is just beginning. He looked one last time at the frozen image of Lira, smiled and faded away, his essence returning to the foundational dream of Somnium, finally at rest. The sanctum was silent. The storm of dream stuff settled. The white flame burned pure and bright. Wraith sank to the floor, utterly spent. Kale pushed himself up, clutching his shoulder, his eyes wide as he stared at Lira. Lira felt the borrowed knowledge and power recede, leaving her hollow, trembling, and more herself than ever. She had not just survived. She had solved the foundational crime of her world. But as the adrenaline faded, a cold thought struck her. The external threat was gone, but the internal one remained. Professor Boreal had a forged memory catcher. The circle of elders thought she was a traitor, and they were all about to find the headmaster and the two prime suspects in the most forbidden place in Somnium, with the sanctum in disarray. The political nightmare was just beginning. End of Episode 6. Episode 7, The Trial of Whispers. The aftermath was a blur of exhaustion and tension. Wraith, though weakened, was once again fully in command of his faculties. His first act was to erect a swift, potent weave of silence and obscurity around the three of them, hiding their presence and the state of the sanctum. He then warped them not to the chamber of stillness, but to his private study in the spire. The study was a testament to a mind under siege. Books were piled chaotically. Half-finished weave diagrams covered every surface, and a pervasive smell of strong tea and ozone hung in the air. Wraith collapsed into a high-backed chair, looking every one of his many years. "We have perhaps an hour before Boreal's cronies think to look for me here," he said, his voice rough. "The circle is in emergency session. He is presenting his evidence. We must craft our defense." "Defense," Kale snapped, wincing as he probed his shoulder. The area wasn't bruised, but the skin was cold and numb, as if a part of him had been erased. "We just saved Somnium from its founding monster. We have the headmaster, cleansed and sane, as a witness. And I am the headmaster who, by my own admission, was subtly manipulated by that monster for decades," Wraith replied grimly. "A monster whose return I failed to detect. A monster whose agent, according to Boreal's narrative, is Lira. Our story is fantastical. His is simple and damning. An unknown, powerful foundling is linked to two major catastrophes. A forged memory places her at the scene of the first. She is found in the most forbidden place in the Academy, having clearly tampered with ancient wards. Who will the circle believe? The respected, if ambitious, professor with physical evidence, or the compromised headmaster and two students with a tale of psychic parasites and thousand-year-old schisms? The truth of it settled like lead in Lira's stomach. They had won the mystical battle and lost the political one. "Then what do we do?" she asked, her voice small. "We fight whispers with whispers," Wraith said, a glint of his old cunning returning to his eyes. "Boreal's power comes from fear and suspicion. We must attack the foundation of his evidence and provide a more compelling, if not provable, narrative. And we have one advantage he does not: the truth and the loyalty of the one entity in Somnium that cannot lie." "The Whispering Library," Lira and Kale said in unison. "Precisely. The library's distress was caused by the theft. It witnessed the theft, and it has now, thanks to your mending of the foundational corruption, begun to heal. This testimony will be pure, but we must get the circle to hear it, and for that we need an ally on the inside." "Archivist Lira," Lira said. Wraith shook his head. "Lira is powerful, but she is seen as an eccentric, emotionally compromised by the loss of her life's work. The circle views the library as a resource, not a witness. No, we need someone on the circle itself." "There is no one," Kale stated flatly. "They're all legacies, old families protecting their status. They'd side with Boreal to maintain order." "Not all," Wraith said, a faint smile touching his lips. "There is one who values truth over tradition, who has always been a thorn in Boreal's side. Professor Phantasma, the ancient onerology teacher who lectured from her glass coffin." Lira remembered the surreal lessons. "She's on the circle?" "The eldest member. She rarely attends, preferring to dream. but when she does, her word carries immense weight. She is attuned to the fundamental health of the dreamscape in a way the others are not. If anyone would sense the healing of the corruption, it is her. We must wake her, and we must do it before the circle reaches a verdict. The plan was desperate. Wraith would return to the circle chamber, playing the weary, concerned leader, subtly undermining Boreal's certainty without revealing their full hand. Meanwhile, Lira and Kale, still technically fugitives, would sneak into the dormitorium, the hall of eternal dreams where Phantasma and other elderly weavers slumbered, and perform a lucid invitation, gently pulling her into a shared, conscious dream state to deliver their message. It's a huge risk, Kale warned. The dormitorium is warded. If we're caught trespassing on dreaming elders, we'll be unraveled on the spot. We have no choice, Lira said, the resolve that had filled her in the sanctum hardening. We're already guilty. Let's be guilty for the right reason. The dormitorium was a vast, silent cavern deep below the main keep. The air was thick with the scent of lavender and deep sleep. Hundreds of crystal beds, each encasing a dreaming weaver, glowed with soft, myriad colors. Finding Phantasma's bed was easy. It was the largest, its crystal frosted with intricate, self-generated dream ice. The wards were psychological, not physical. Approaching the sleepers with intent to harm would trigger a catastrophic nightmare feedback. But with intent to invite, Lira hoped the library's resonance still clinging to her, and Kale's innate sensitivity to ripples, would be enough. They knelt by the coffin. Inside, Professor Phantasma looked impossibly ancient and perfectly peaceful. Ready,
Lira whispered.
Kale nodded, placing a hand on the crystal. Lira did the same, closed her eyes, and reached out with the gentle, respectful tone she'd used on Leo's nightmare. She didn't push. She knocked. The world dissolved into a tranquil, twilight forest. A stream bubbled over smooth stones. Sitting on a mossy bank, feeding crumbs to translucent fish, was Professor Phantasma, looking no older than 40. "Students," she said without looking up, her voice melodic and clear, "you interrupt a very pleasant digestion of 17th century French pastry dreams. This had better be a matter of existential importance." They told her everything. The corruption, Corvus, the somniant, the library, the rending Boreal's frame-up. Phantasma listened, her expression unreadable, occasionally tossing another crumb. When they finished, she was silent for a long time. "A fascinating dream," she finally said. "A compelling narrative. But the dreamscape is built on narratives. Why should I believe yours over Professor Boreal's?" "Because the library is healing," Lira insisted. "You can feel it, can't you? The foundation of Somnium. The ache is gone." Phantasma's eyes, sharp and intelligent, finally met Lira's. "I did feel a shift, a great pressure lifting. I attributed it to a pleasant change in the collective unconscious." She sighed. "Boreal is a blunt instrument, but he is not inherently evil. He is afraid. Fear makes for convincing forgeries. Your story, however, has the ring of a deeper truth, a messy, mythic truth, the kind that usually precedes a change of age." She stood, brushing dream moss from her skirts. "I will attend the circle. I will listen, and I will ask to hear the testimony of the Whispering Library. If the library confirms your tale, Boreal's house of cards will fall. If it does not—" She gave them a look that was both kind and terrifying. "Then you will have dragged an old woman from a very lovely dream for nothing, and I will not be pleased." She vanished from the dream, and a moment later, they heard a soft crack from the waking world. The frost on Phantasma's crystal coffin was splitting. Back in the real world, they fled the dormitorium, their hearts pounding. They had done their part. Now they had to get to the circle chamber to witness the outcome. They arrived at the great engraved doors to find a tense crowd of students and junior faculty, including a worried-looking Lira. Inside, voices were raised. An obvious security breach. The sanctum itself has been violated. Boreal's voice boomed. By whom? Caspian? Wraith's voice, calm but firm, cut through. You have your suspect in custody, do you not? Or did she somehow escape the chamber of stillness, bypass my ancestors' wards, and accomplish all this while you were presenting your evidence? They slipped through the crowd to a side entrance. The circle chamber was a round room with tiered seating. The 12 elders sat in high chairs of dreaming wood. Boreal stood in the center, the glowing memory catcher in his hand. Wraith stood opposite him, looking drained but composed. In a new chair, looking freshly awoken and sipping from a cup of dream tea, was Phantasma. I am merely stating the facts, Headmaster, Boreal sneered. The wards were keyed to your blood. The only explanation is that you either aided her, or you are so compromised you no longer control your own resonance. The accusation hung in the air, a direct challenge to Wraith's authority. Before we leap to conclusions about resonance and compromise, Phantasma's clear, dreaming voice interrupted. Might I suggest we consult a more reliable witness? One that has no ambition, no fear, and was present for the initial crime. All eyes turned to her. Boreal looked confused. What witness? The victim, Phantasma said. The whispering library. A murmur ran through the room. Lira, who was standing at the periphery, stepped forward, hope flickering in her storm-gray eyes. The library is not a person, Phantasma, scoffed another elder. It is a persistent, intelligent dream field of immense complexity, Phantasma replied. It has been in distress. It has now noticeably begun to calm. I propose we ask it through its archivist what happened. A simple, direct dreaming. Let the library show us its memory of the theft. Boreal went pale. Preposterous. The library is damaged, unstable. Its testimony would be chaotic, useless. Or, Wraith said softly, it would be the one untainted truth in this room. I second the proposal. A vote was called. With Phantasma's influence and Wraith's authority, it passed, if narrowly. A dreaming basin was brought to the center. Lira approached it, her hands trembling slightly. She closed her eyes, touched the water, and cast her consciousness into the library's core. The air above the basin shimmered. An image formed, clearer than any memory catcher. It was the lower stack, the blank wall, and a figure not Lira. The figure was tall, shrouded in a borrowed cloak of authority that blurred its features, but its movements were precise, elegant, cruel. It performed the unraveling weave on the Codex Primordial. And then, the image did what Lira's vision had done. It panned out, showing the second presence. A patch of cold, hungry shadow observing from the stacks. The shadow's connection was shown as a faint, black thread, leading back, not to Lira, but to a signature that made the basin water steam and crackle with recognition. The corrupted, latent signature that had until recently been woven through Headmaster Wraith's power. Then the image changed. It showed the rending in the tower. It showed the same black-threaded signature guiding the nightmare, using Wraith's resonance as a carrier wave. And finally, it showed the moment in the sanctum, Lira, Kale, and Wraith, fighting not as the corruption, but against it, with Lira at the center pulling the black threads free and gifting the somniant a dream of peace. The images faded. The chamber was utterly silent. Phantasma took a final sip of her tea. It would seem, she said mildly, that the library has a rather clear perspective. The accused are the healers. The corruption was an ancient, external parasite that latched onto our foundations. and the only one here guilty of forgery and false witness. She turned her ancient, dreaming eyes on Professor Boreal, who had shrunk in on himself, face ashen. Is you, Caspian? You were so eager to find a simple enemy. You became the puppet of the real one. Boreal's career was over. He was stripped of his position on the spot, led away to be psychically assessed for any lingering influence. The charges against Lira and Kale were not just dropped. They were expunged. They were heroes. But as the crowd erupted in relieved chatter and Wraith began to give orders for a full audit of security weaves, Lira felt no triumph. She looked at Kale, who was staring at his numb shoulder, then at Lira, who was weeping quietly with relief by the dreaming basin. They had survived the trial, but the cost was visible on Kale's face, and the true enemy, they now knew, was not a person but an idea, the idea that dreams could be owned, controlled, and corrupted. And that idea, Lira suspected, had not died with the Somniant. It had simply lost its champion. For now. End of Episode 7. Episode 8. The Weight of a Name. The days that followed were a whirlwind of uncomfortable celebrity. Lira was no longer Ghost Lira or Rending Lira. She was Lira the Key, Lira the Cleanser, the Dream Tailor. The names buzzed around her like flies. She and Kale were given a formal commendation in the Great Hall. Alara hugged her fiercely, full of apologies and admiration. Even the food in the refectory seemed better when she walked in, the cooks piling extra helpings on her plate. But the attention felt like a poorly fitting coat. It itched. The real victory, the quiet in her mind, the absence of the foundational ache was internal. The public celebration was for a story that had been sanitized for consumption. The circle spoke of a vanquished external threat and the resilience of Somnium, glossing over the centuries of internal rot and Wraith's nearfall. Kale, too, seemed to retreat into a deeper silence. The numbness in his shoulder hadn't spread, but it hadn't receded either. It was a void, a patch of psychic frostbite where a memory had been eaten. He avoided the crowds, spending more time in the quieter folds or tinkering with his labyrinth devices. Lira found him one afternoon in the fold of the sunken cathedral, a melancholic, beautiful dream of a Gothic church resting at the bottom of a calm, deep sea. Light filtered down in cathedral shafts, illuminating floating dust motes that were actually tiny, sleeping jellyfish. "It doesn't feel real, does it?" she said, sitting beside him on a pew made of coral. "Which part?" he asked, not looking up from the copper coil he was adjusting. "The part where we save the world, or the part where everyone suddenly loves us?" "Both. It feels like someone else's dream." "That's because it is," Kale said bluntly. "It's the dream the circle needs to have now. Stability, victory, the neat end to a story." He finally looked at her, his gray eyes serious. "But our story isn't neat. You've got a 1,000-year-old ghost in your family tree. I've got a hole in my soul where a happy memory used to be. Wraith has the guilt of a lifetime of being a sleeper agent. And Somnium, its foundation is clean, but the walls are still cracked." He was right. The political victory was a facade. The real work, healing, was just beginning. This became clear when Headmaster Wraith summoned her to his now neatened study. He looked better, the lines on his face less like cracks and more like marks of experience. "Lira, please sit. This is not an official summons. It's a request." He gestured to a chair. "The library is recovering. Lyra is happier than I've seen her in centuries. But the Codex Primordial is still unmade. Its essence is dispersed. Without it, the library is stable but sterile, cannot generate new foundational narratives. It can only preserve the old." "Can it be rewoven?" Lira asked. "Perhaps, but not by me. My weaving is tainted by association even if clean now. Not by Lira. She is the library's heart, not its author. He leaned forward. The Codex was the first story dreamed by a human with the awareness of dreaming. It was the template. Corvus was the greatest weaver of his age because he understood that template instinctively. You, his descendant, have that same instinct. You proved it when you spoke to the knot, when you tailored Leo's nightmare. You don't force dreams. You converse with them. A cold knot formed in Lyra's stomach. You want me to reweave the first story? No, Wraith said, shaking his head. That is an impossible burden, and a dangerous one. The original is gone, but the library needs a new core narrative. Not to replace, but to continue. A successor text. A codex novice. He paused. I believe you can help it dream one. The idea was staggering. How? By doing what you do. Listen to the library. Hear all its whispers. Its grief, its joy, its vast memory. And then, help it find a new story to tell about itself. Not a story of loss, but of recovery. Not of theft, but of guardianship. You would be the midwife, not the mother. It was a task of years, of a lifetime. It was also the only thing that felt truly right since she'd arrived. I'll try, she said. Good. There is one more thing. Wraith's expression grew solemn. A name. You have never known your family name. Your mother hid it for your protection. With Corvus's shadow gone, that protection is no longer needed, and the truth is your right. He took a deep breath. Your mother's name was Lira. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. Lira? Like, not your friend. A different Lira. Lira Corvus. The last of the direct line. She was a brilliant, fearless weaver. She realized what she carried, the key, the tainted bloodline. She fled into the waking world, buried her power, had you, and hid you in the most dreamless place she could find, the heart of a modern city. She hoped the line would end with a whisper, not a catastrophe. His eyes were full of sympathy. You are Lira Corvus, heir to the greatest and most tragic legacy in our history. The weight of the name settled on her shoulders. Corvus, the betrayer, the savior, the genius, the monster. It was all of that, and now it was hers. She left Wraith's study in a daze, the name echoing in her mind.
Lira Corvus.
Felt strange. Not wrong, but heavy. As she walked the halls, students nodded with new respect, but she felt their eyes differently now. Did they know? Would they see the shadow of the monster in her? She found herself at the door to the whispering library. It was quieter now, the whispers a soft, thoughtful murmur rather than a pained groan. She entered. Archivist Lira was at her nook, but she wasn't searching. She was reading a stained glass book that glowed with a gentle green light. She smiled as Lira approached. He told you, Lira said. It wasn't a question. Lira Corvus, Lira said, testing the name aloud. Lyra's smile turned sad. A name is a story we are given. We spend our lives deciding how to tell it. She closed the book. He was not always a shadow, you know. He was my dearest friend. His curiosity was a light that illuminated worlds. The tragedy was not his ambition, but his inability to see the darkness it cast. She reached out and took Lyra's hand. You have his light, and you have your mother's courage, and you have something neither had. You have the wisdom to be afraid of the right things. That is how you will tell your story. Tears pricked Lyra's eyes. For the first time, she didn't feel like an orphan or a fugitive or a key. She felt like a link in a chain that had been broken and was now being mended. The headmaster said I should help the library dream a new story, Lira said. Lyra's storm-gray eyes sparkled. Then let us begin. It is eager to speak to you. It has been waiting for a Corvus who listens. Lyra led her to the very center of the library, to a circular space where the shelves parted. In the center was a pedestal of dreaming stone, now empty where the Codex Primordial once rested. Place your hands on the stone, Lyra instructed, and listen, not with your mind, with your name. Lyra stepped forward. She placed her palms on the cool, smooth stone. She closed her eyes and let go. The whispers of the library didn't flood her. They invited her. She felt its vastness, not as overwhelming chaos, but as a patient, immense intelligence, weary from long grief and hopeful for the first time in centuries. It showed her its memories, not just of stories, but of the readers. The joy of a student discovering a new idea, the comfort of a homesick weaver finding a tale of home, the determination of a researcher on the brink of a breakthrough. The library's true story wasn't in the books. It was in the connection it facilitated. And it wanted to dream of connection, of bridges, not walls, of sharing, not hoarding, of a story that was never finished, always being added to by every dreamer who entered. A concept began to form in Lyra's mind, not as words, but as a shape. A living, growing lattice, a crystalline tree whose leaves were individual stories, whose roots were shared memory, whose fruit was new understanding. She didn't weave it. She simply held the shape in her mind and offered it to the library. Is this your dream? The library's response was a wave of pure, resonant affirmation. The empty pedestal began to glow. From its center, a single, slender thread of silver light shot through with veins of gold, and the deep blue of shared sorrow spiraled upward. It grew, branched, fractalized, becoming more complex with every second. It was not a book. It was the Sylvis Codex, the tree of stories. It was a living, evolving narrative, and Lyra had helped give it its first breath. As the Sylvis stood, shimmering, in the heart of the library, the whispers changed. They became a harmonious, many-voiced hum, a song of renewal. Lyra stepped back, awestruck. She had done it. She had helped the library find its new dream. Lyra was weeping openly, tears of joy cutting tracks through centuries of dust on her face. "Welcome home, Lyra Corvus," she whispered. For the first time, Lyra believed it. This was home. Not because she was a hero, but because she had a place. A legacy to heal, a library to tend, and a story of her own to write. But as she left the library, buzzing with a quiet, profound joy, she saw Cale waiting for her in the corridor. His face was pale, his expression urgent. In his hand, he held his copper labyrinth device. It was glowing with a faint, sickly yellow light it had never shone before. "We need to talk," he said, his voice tight. "Somewhere no one dreams." He led her to the chamber of stillness, now empty. He activated the labyrinth, creating their familiar bubble of privacy. "What is it?" Lyra asked, her joy evaporating. "I've been monitoring the psychic resonance of the folds since the cleansing." He held up the device. The yellow light pulsed like a slow, diseased heartbeat. "The overall signal is clean, healthy, except for one. The fold I was found in. The dream of the shipwreck."
Lira remembered.
Cale was a foundling, discovered in a collapsing fold of a maritime disaster. "It was always a sad, stable dream," Cale continued. "A loop of a storm and a sinking ship. But since the Sylvan Codex formed, its resonance has changed. It's become aggressive, infecting the folds near it, and it's projecting a new image into the resonance field." He met her eyes, his own full of dread. "It's not a ship anymore, Lyra. It's a cage. And inside the cage, there's a figure. It looks like me, and it's pounding on the bars." He took a shaky breath. I think the Somniant didn't just take a memory from me. I think it left something behind. A seed. And whatever it is, it's waking up. And it's using my connection to that fold to do it. The victory, the name, the new codex. It all crumbled, revealing the crack in the foundation Kale had warned about. The enemy wasn't just an idea. It was a latent infection, and it had found a new host. The story was not over. It had just entered a new, darker chapter. End of Episode 8. Episode 9, The Drowning Fold. The Chamber of Stillness, designed to suppress all dream activity, felt like the only safe place in the world. The yellow pulse from Kale's labyrinth was a vile counter-rhythm to the calm white nothingness. A seed. Lira's voice was barely a whisper. What does that mean? I don't know, Kale admitted, his usual analytical cool replaced by a raw, unfamiliar fear. He stared at his numb shoulder as if it were a foreign object. When it touched me, it didn't just take. Felt like it injected something. A piece of its emptiness, its hunger. I thought it was just trauma, psychic frostbite. But if it's resonating with my origin fold. He trailed off, the implication clear. The Somniant, in its death throes, had not just tried to consume Kale. It had tried to replace him, to plant a piece of itself in a receptive host, a foundling already touched by tragedy, with a strong, untethered connection to a powerful, negative dream. We have to tell Wraith, Lira said immediately. And say what? Kale's laugh was hollow. Hello, Headmaster. The corruption you just cleansed might have turned me into a time bomb? After everything, they'll throw me into the obsidian vault and lose the key. Or worse, they'll try to cleanse me and scrape out whatever's left of me in the process. He had a point. The Circle's instinct, after such a scare, would be towards absolute caution, even ruthlessness. Then we handle it ourselves, Lira said, the decision solidifying as she spoke. We go to the shipwreck fold. We see what's happening. If it's a piece of the Somniant, maybe I can talk to it. Like I did with the last one. That almost killed you, and you had the memory of Corvus and a triad not to help. Kale argued. This is different. This is anchored in my past. In my pain. You can't tailor a memory that's part of someone's soul. I'm not going to tailor it, Lira said, a plan forming from desperation and instinct. I'm going to witness it. The Somniant was born from hunger and envy. It wanted what it couldn't have. Maybe this seed wants the same. Maybe it just wants to be seen. Not as a monster, but as what it is. A lost, starving thing. It was a dangerous, naive hope. But it was the only tool she had that wasn't a weapon. Kale, after a long silence, nodded reluctantly. If we're doing this, we do it now. Before the change in the fold gets strong enough for others to notice. The dream of the shipwreck was located in the penumbral quarter, a region of Somnium where older, sadder, less visited folds drifted like melancholy islands. The journey there was through increasingly dim and silent corridors. The air grew cold and damp, smelling of salt and old wood. The entrance to the fold was an arched doorway of warped, blackened timber, like the remains of a hull. The air around it vibrated with the new, aggressive resonance Kale's device had detected. The sad loop of the storm was gone, replaced by a low, menacing drone, the sound of a beast growling in its sleep. Ready? Kale asked, his face taut. No, Lira said honestly and stepped through. The change was horrific. The fold had once been a vast, gray seascape, with a doomed ship locked in a perpetual tragic descent. Now the water was an inky, viscous black, clotting like oil. The sky was a cage of intersecting, glowing yellow bars of sickly light that hummed with the same frequency as Kale's device. And in the center, where the ship's mast should have been, was the cage Kale described. It was a crude sphere of the same yellow energy, floating above the toxic sea. Inside, a figure indeed pounded silently against the walls. It was a shadowy, distorted reflection of Kale. Same height, same build, but its features were blurred with rage and desperation. Its eyes two pits of the same hungry nothingness as the Somnians. As they appeared on a phantom stretch of deck, the figure in the cage stopped pounding. It turned its void-eyed gaze on them. Found. The word wasn't spoken. It was the sound of the cage bars vibrating. The origin. The host. It was looking at Kale. Kale gasped, clutching his shoulder. The numbness was spreading in a cold wave down his arm. It's pulling. Come. Be complete. The hunger is the truth. The dream is a lie. The cage door shimmered, opening a crack. A torrent of that inky black water surged from the sea, not towards them, but into Kale's shadow on the deck, as if siphoning through it. Kale cried out, falling to his knees. Lira could see it. A thin, black thread, visible in the nightmare light, connecting his shadow to the cage, pumping the fold's corrupted essence into him. This wasn't a seed waking up. It was a symbiosis trying to complete itself. The somniant fragment needed Kale's living connection to the waking world, his humanity, to fully manifest. And it was using his own traumatic origin to do it.
Lira acted.
She didn't attack the thread or the cage. She ran to Kale and placed her hands on his temples, as she had with the knot, as she had with the library stone. Show me, she commanded, not him but the connection. Show me the memory it's using. Show me the shipwreck. She was plunged not into a neat memory, but into the raw, screaming heart of a trauma. Not Kale's memory, he was too young to have one. This was the dream's memory. The final, terrified moments of the dreamer who had originally dreamed this fold centuries ago. The crash of timber, the roar of water, the taste of salt and fear, the overwhelming grief of lives ending too soon, the profound injustice of it. It was a dream of pure, unadulterated loss. And the somniant fragment had twisted that loss. It had taken the grief and turned it into rage. The injustice into a hunger for revenge against a world that allows such pain. Lira understood now. The fragment wasn't just a monster. It was a trauma given sentience. It was the shipwreck rage and despair, given a voice and purpose by the Somniant's corrupting influence. She broke the connection, gasping. Kale was shaking violently, his eyes starting to film over with the same black sheen as the water. It's not you it wants, Lira said urgently, holding his face. It's the pain. Thinks the pain is all you are. We have to show it it's wrong. How? Kale choked out. By remembering the rest, Lira said. She reached into her own mind, not for power, but for a specific feeling. The feeling she'd had when she first saw Somnium. The feeling of coming home. She pushed that feeling towards Kale, through their contact. You survived this. You were found. You learned. You have a friend who's an idiot and is trying to save you. A flicker of silver, Kale's own stubborn will, fought against the black in his eyes. The cage figure shrieked in frustration. Lies. The pain is real. The loss is forever. Yes, Lira shouted back, standing up and facing the cage. The pain is real. The loss is forever. But it's not the only thing that's real. She turned back to Kale, pulling him up. Your memory it took. What was it? What did it eat? Kale, fighting for every word, said, my first good dream at Somnium, seeing the font of Mnemosyne. The water was so clear. I felt peace. It was the memory of his first hope. The Somniant had taken his first hope and left behind its despair. Lira made her choice. She couldn't give that memory back, but she could offer a new one. a shared one. "Look at me, Kale," she said. She poured every ounce of her own feeling. Not pity, not fear, but fierce, unwavering solidarity into her gaze. The feeling of partnership in the dark, of shared secrets in balconies, of unspoken trust in the face of impossible odds. She crafted from her own emotion a new dream, right there, in the heart of the nightmare. The dream of not being alone. She gifted it to him, a golden thread of connection against the black torrent. Kale's back straightened. The black sheen in his eyes receded, pushed back by a spark of defiant recognition. He wasn't just the boy from the shipwreck. He was the boy who survived, the student, the investigator, the friend. He turned to the cage, to his own twisted reflection. "You can have the pain," he said, his voice gaining strength. "You can keep it. It's yours. But you don't get me. I am more than what I lost." He raised his good hand, not to weave, but in a gesture of rejection. He wasn't fighting the black thread. He was severing his identification with it. He was refusing the symbiosis. The cage figure howled. The black water raged, but the connection thread frayed and snapped. The fold convulsed. Without Kale's living soul to anchor it, the corrupted narrative began to collapse. The cage flickered. The figure inside looked confused, then afraid, then sorrowful. For a second, Lira saw not a monster, but a lost soul, drowning in its own pain forever. As the fold dissolved into chaotic, dying dream stuff, Lira did one last thing. She sent a final, gentle thought towards the fading fragment, not of forgiveness, but of acknowledgement. "I see your pain. It was real. Now rest." The yellow light vanished. The inky sea cleared to a tranquil, eternal gray. The cage was gone. The ship was once again sinking in its slow, sad, eternal loop. The dream of the shipwreck was restored to its original, tragic, but stable state. On the phantom deck, Kale slumped against Lira, breathing heavily. The numbness was gone from his shoulder, replaced by a deep, aching scar on his psyche, but it was his scar. The foreign presence was purged. They had won. But the cost was written on Kale's face, the loss of a precious memory, replaced by the visceral horror of nearly being unmade by his own past. As they limped from the restored, quiet fold, Lira knew the truth. This was their life now, not as heroes in a finished story, but as guardians in an endless one. They would always carry the scars, and the dreamscape would always have dark corners where pain could curdle into something dangerous. Their job was not to eliminate the darkness, but to keep it from swallowing the light. And to do that, they would have to keep weaving, keep mending, keep dreaming together. End of Episode 9. Episode 10. The Unwritten Page. The recovery was slow. Physically, they were unharmed. Psychically, Kale bore the scar of the severance, a newfound quietness in him that spoke of a battle fought in the deepest trenches of the self. The memory of his first piece at the font was gone, a permanent blank spot. In its place was the visceral knowledge of the abyss, and the choice he made to turn from it. Somnium, in its official capacity, knew nothing of this new battle. The restored, calm resonance of the shipwreck fold was noted by the monitoring weavers as a positive side effect of the great cleansing. Lira and Kale kept their secret, a new and heavier bond between them. Headmaster Wraith, however, was not fooled. He summoned them a week later, his gaze missing nothing. The penumbral quarter stabilizer reported a recalibration in the dream of the shipwreck, he said without preamble, steepling his fingers. A brief period of intense dissonance, followed by a return to baseline purity, remarkably similar to the signature of the library's healing. He looked from Lira to Kale. "Would either of you care to annotate the official report?" They exchanged a glance. Lira nodded slightly. Kale spoke, his voice flat. The corruption left a remnant. In me. It was trying to use my origin fold to regrow. We dealt with it. Wraith closed his eyes for a moment, a weary understanding settling on his features. I see. And the method? I refused it, Kale said simply. And Lira showed it was wrong. Wraith opened his eyes, a profound respect in them. A more powerful weave than any I could teach. The will to be, and the compassion to witness. He leaned forward. This must remain between us. The circle cannot know that the infection was so personal, so latent. It would create a panic, a witch hunt for hidden scars. You have done Somnium a second, quieter service. Thank you. It was not praise. It was an acknowledgement of a burden shared. What now? Lira asked. Now, Wraith said, a hint of his old energy returning. You learn, properly, not as fugitives or crisis weavers, but as students of Somnium. Your unique talents will be channeled. Lira, you will work with Archivist Lira on the Sylvis Codex, and with Professor Phantasma on advanced oniric communication, learning to speak not just to dreams, but to the spaces between them. Kale, your skills in resonance detection and unstable fold navigation are unprecedented. You will work with the wardens of the penumbral quarter, and with me on developing new safeguards. We must build a Somnium that is not just clean, but resilient. It was a future, purpose. The following months were a time of deep, unglamorous work. Lira spent hours in the library, not fighting monsters, but learning the delicate language of the Sylvis. She found she could encourage certain branches to grow, guiding the library's new dream towards themes of resilience and empathy. With Phantasma, she learned to hear the silent dreams. The hopes and fears so faint they never fully formed, the emotional weather of the waking world that brushed against the dreamscape. Kale, in the quiet gloom of the penumbral quarter, found a strange peace. His personal scar made him uniquely sensitive to the delicate balance of sadder dreams. He could spot a nascent instability, a grief dream tipping towards rage, a loneliness dream thickening into despair, and, with subtle interventions often designed by Lira, help it find a stable, if sorrowful, equilibrium. He and Wraith designed new psychic baffles, weaves that could dampen corruptive resonance before it spread. They were healers of the spirit of the place. Lira, true to her legacy nature, threw herself into reorganizing the student body, starting a first dream mentorship program pairing new foundlings with older students. The atmosphere in Somnium slowly shifted from one of ancient hierarchy and whispered suspicion to something more open, more curious. One evening, Lira found Kale at their usual spot by the font of Mnemosyne. He was tossing pebbles into the water, watching the dream echoes ripple. Phantasma asked me something today, Lira said, sitting beside him. She asked what my first dream was. The first one I ever had that was truly wholly mine. Not a leak, not an invasion. My own. Kale stopped tossing pebbles. What did you say? I didn't have an answer, Lira admitted. All my life, my dreams were other people's. Then they were crises to solve. I've never had the luxury of a dream that was just for me. Kale was silent for a long time. The memory it took, my first good dream here, it was of this font. The piece of it. He gestured to the water. It's gone. I can't get it back. But I was thinking you don't have a first dream. And I lost mine. He looked at her, a faint, genuine smile touching his lips for the first time in weeks. Seems like a problem we could solve together. The idea was beautiful in its simplicity. They would make a new dream, a shared one, not to fight, not to heal, not to prove anything, just to be. They decided to do it in the chamber of waking sleep, now a place of practice, not judgment. They stood in the center of the gray space. "Where do we start?" Lira asked. "You're the listener," Kale said. "You start. Listen to us. To this." He gestured between them. "To what we want this dream to feel like." Lira closed her eyes. She quieted the noise of the academy, the whisper of the library, the echo of past battles. She listened to the space between her and Kale. It felt of quiet understanding, of shared secrets, of trust forged in impossible fires. It felt of two jagged edges that, without trying to change each other, somehow fit together to make a stronger shape. "It feels solid," she murmured, "and quiet, and full of potential, like the moment before a story begins." "Then that's our thread," Kale said. Together, they didn't so much weave as allow. Lira held the feeling. Kale, with his precise control, gave it form. From their joined intention, the gray floor of the chamber bloomed with soft, gray-green moss. A single, slender tree grew, its bark silver, its leaves a deep, calm blue. It was not the majestic sylvis of the library. It was a sapling. A single, perfect paper lantern hung from its branch, emitting a soft, golden light that pushed back the gray just enough to create a circle of warmth. Around the tree, the moss formed a pattern. Not a labyrinth, but a single, unbroken line that curled around itself, neither beginning nor end. A Mobius strip of shared experience. The air smelled of ozone, old paper, and the distant, clean scent of the sea after a storm. It was a small dream, a simple one, but it was utterly, completely theirs. A pocket of peace they had built from the ground up. They sat under the silver sapling, in the circle of lantern light, and said nothing. There was nothing to say. The dream said it all. This was their answer. This was their defense against the darkness, not just for Somnium, but for themselves. They would carry their scars and their legacies. They would mend the broken dreams of the world. But they would also protect this small, quiet, shared space. A dream of their own. As they let the small dream dissolve back into the gray, Lira knew this was not an ending. The pages of the Sylvis Codex were still blank, waiting for new stories. The penumbral quarter would always need tending. New students would arrive with new pains and new potentials. The work never ended. But for the first time, Lira Corvus looked at the unwritten page of tomorrow not with fear, but with a quiet, steady curiosity. She was no longer just a receiver, a key, a tailor. She was a weaver, and her story, her own story, was just beginning. End of Episode 10. Episode 11, The Cracks in the World. Peace, Lira discovered, was not a destination but a daily practice. 2 years flowed by in a rhythm of study, healing, and quiet companionship. The silver sapling dream remained their secret sanctuary, a touchstone they could return to when the weight of their duties grew heavy. Lira, now 18, had grown into her name and her role. Working alongside archivist Lira, she had helped the Sylvis Codex evolve into a living chronicle of resilience. New branches represented the healed folds and the stories of students who had overcome their nightmares. She was no longer just a student. She was the librarian adjutant, a title that carried respect without the stifling weight of legacy politics. Kale, his internal scars a source of strength rather than a wound, had become the warden scout of the penumbral quarter. His maps of unstable dream resonance were works of art and vital utility. He and Wraith had implemented the Baffle system, creating an early warning network that made another large-scale corruption almost impossible. Yet Wraith himself was changing. The vigor he had regained after the cleansing was fading. He moved slower, his legendary focus sometimes drifting during council meetings. He spent more time in his study, staring at the old maps of London, his expression unreadable. When Lira asked, he would simply smile wearily and say, "An old man's memories, my dear. Pay it no mind." The first true crack in their hard-won peace appeared not in a dream, but in a report from the Waking World monitoring station. Lira, their friend, now a prefect, brought it to them in the library, her face serious. "It's probably nothing," she said, placing the crystal slate on the table. "But the threshold for nothing is a lot lower these days." The report detailed a cluster of anomalous events in central London, all within a square mile of the British Museum. Cases of severe, shared night terrors in a single apartment block. A renowned sleep therapist found catatonic, muttering about the city under the city. Most curiously, several antiquities restorers at the museum had all taken sudden leave, complaining of identical, vivid nightmares about the artifacts they were working on, specifically, a collection of Mesopotamian clay tablets. "The dream of the whispering stones," Lira murmured, peering over Lyra's shoulder. Her storm-gray eyes were clouded. "A very old, very deep dream stratum. Shouldn't be active. It's geological, part of the bedrock of the human collective unconscious." "Could it be a natural surge?" Cale asked, already pulling up resonance maps on his own device. "Unlikely," Lira said. "It would take a massive psychic shift to disturb it. Or a deliberate excavation," Lira finished, a cold dread pooling in her stomach. The words of the somniant corrupted Corvus echoed in her mind. "The pattern will be unmade and remade." They had stopped the architect, but what if he had left blueprints? Wraith's reaction to the report was alarming. Instead of deploying scouts or calling a council, he became very still. "This is not a matter for Somnium," he declared in a tone that brooked no argument. "It is a waking world issue, a coincidence of stress and suggestion. We are dream tenders, not policemen for mundane neuroses." It was so utterly unlike him that Lira and Cale exchanged a worried glance. The wraith they knew would have been the first to investigate the faintest whisper of disturbance. That night, Lyra's own dreams, usually a placid sea of controlled observation, were invaded. Not by a foreign presence, but by a memory, one that was not hers. She was Alistair Wraith, decades younger, standing not in Somnium, but in a dimly lit London alley. Before him was a woman with fierce eyes and wild hair, cradling a sleeping infant. Lyra's mother, Lira Corvus. "You have to take her, Alistair," the memory Lira pleaded, her voice ragged with fear. "He's not gone. His work isn't gone. He made copies. In the stone, in the old dreams." "Where, Lira?" young Wraith asked, his voice tight. "The foundations," she whispered, her eyes darting as if shadows themselves listened. "Where the first city was dreamed on waking stone." He called it the lithosnosis, the knowledge in the stone. If they find it, they won't need a key. They'll have the chisel. The dream memory ended with a gut-wrenching sensation of loss as Lira placed the infant into Wraith's arms and melted into the city's shadows. Lira woke with a start, the taste of old rain and desperation in her mouth. It wasn't a leak. It was a bequest, a memory deliberately buried in Wraith's psyche, set to trigger and transfer to her if he ever became unable to act. She went straight to Cale. Together, they bypassed the official channels and used his clandestine warp path to return to London. The city felt different, not through any visual cue, but through the dreamscape. The usual chaotic, colorful buzz of millions of sleeping minds was dampened, muted. Over the Bloomsbury area, it was as if a heavy, gray blanket of silence had been thrown, and beneath that silence, something old and granular stirred. They stood across from the British Museum, its grand facade illuminated by spotlights. To their physical eyes, it was just a building, To their weaver sight, it was a nexus. Faint, ochre-colored tendrils, the resonance of the whispering stones, seeped from its foundations, seeping into the dream space of the surrounding streets, poisoning sleep with ancient dread. "It's not an attack," Kale said, his device humming with a low, urgent frequency. "It's an extraction. Something is actively drilling into that old dream stratum and pulling the resonance to the surface." To read it, Lira realized. The lithosnosis. Corvus's copies. Someone is trying to read the original pattern from the world's oldest memories. As they watched, a familiar, sleek black car pulled up to the museum's staff entrance. A tall, elegant figure in a long coat got out, accompanied by two assistants carrying shielded cases. Even from a distance, the aura of the figure was unmistakable, a powerful, controlled, and utterly disciplined weaver. Not a chaotic corrupter, but a scholar. Collector. It was Caspian Boreal. He looked older, sharper, cleansed of his past desperation. His expulsion from Somnium hadn't broken him. It had refined him. He had traded the politics of the Academy for the limitless, unregulated archives of the waking world's oldest dreams. "He's not using somniance or corruption?" Kale breathed, a grudging hint of respect in his voice. "He's using archaeology. Brutal, psychic archaeology." Boreal looked up, as if sensing their gaze. His eyes met Lira's across the distance. He didn't smile. He simply gave a small, polite nod of recognition, one professional to another, and turned to enter the museum. The message was clear. "This is no longer your domain. This is mine." They warped back to Somnium, hearts heavy. The threat was not a monster from the dark, but a man with a permit, funded by unseen waking world interests, museums, universities, perhaps governments, fascinated by the practical applications of honorology. Boreal was mining the bedrock of the human psyche, and the collateral damage was the sanity of everyone living above the dig site. They confronted Wraith in his study. This time Lira didn't ask. She showed him. She poured the inherited memory of her mother's warning into a dream crystal and let it play on his desk. Wraith watched, his face crumbling from authority into profound grief and guilt. When it finished, he seemed to shrink in his chair. "She made me promise," he whispered, staring at his hands. "Promise to let the past stay buried, to protect you, not the world. I failed her in so many ways. I thought, with the somniant gone, the danger was past. I wanted to give you a normal life, or as normal as it could be." "Headmaster," Lira said, not unkindly but firmly, "Boreal is digging up weapons. He may not mean to use them, but he will crack the world open to do it. You can't protect me from this. I'm already in it." Wraith looked at her, truly looked at her, seeing not the girl from the tunnel, but the young woman she had become, Alara's daughter, Corvus's heir, the tailor of Somnium. He saw the same determined fire. He took a deep, shuddering breath, and the weight of years seemed to lift slightly, replaced by a steely resolve. "Then we must do what we should have done long ago. We must secure the lithosnosis, not destroy it. Such a foundational layer cannot be destroyed without catastrophic consequences. We must translate it first, steal its meaning away from the stone into a safer medium." He looked at the Silvus Codex, visible through his window, glowing softly in the library. "We must give it to the tree." The plan was audacious and incredibly dangerous. They would have to go to the source, the psychic excavation site at the museum, infiltrate Boreal's operation, and perform a psychic siphon, redirecting the unearthed ancient dream essence into the waiting, resilient vessel of the Silvus Codex before Boreal could record it with his crude, damaging instruments. It required the full, secret strength of their new Somnium. Lira would prepare the Codex to receive a trauma of ages. Kale and his wardens would create a diversion at the edges of the penumbral quarter, drawing Somnium's official attention away from their absence. Lira would manage the student body, maintaining calm, and Lira and Wraith would go to London, not as teacher and student, but as partners, the last guardian of the old way and the first hope of the new. As they prepared to leave, Kale pulled Lira aside. He pressed a new labyrinth device into her hand, smaller, more powerful. It's tuned to the codex's resonance. It'll create a stable warp line straight to the library. Once you start the siphon, you'll have one shot to send the data stream home. He held her gaze. Don't try to be a hero. Be a librarian. Acquire the text and get out. Lira hugged him, feeling the solid, real strength of him. Hold the fort. We will, he said. Now go shut down Boreal's illegal digging operation. With a final, determined nod at Wraith, Lira stepped with him into the warp. They were not heading into a nightmare, but into a calculated, scholarly disaster. And they had to stop it with precision, not power. The fate of the world's oldest dreams hung in the balance. End of Episode 11. Episode 12. The Lithosnosis and the Last Lesson. The British Museum After Hours was a cathedral of silence, but not a peaceful one. The air thrummed with a subaudible vibration, the sound of ancient sleep being forcibly disturbed. Boreal's security was sophisticated, a blend of waking world technology and subtle, aggressive dream wards designed to induce confusion and amnesia in intruders. Wraith moved with a grace Lira hadn't seen in years, his umbrella dispersing the psychic wards like smoke. He always was heavy-handed, he muttered, a hint of his old disdain returning. Power without nuance. They descended into the lower restoration laboratories, following the ochre tendrils of resonance that grew thicker and more painful with every step. The feeling was oppressive, not the active malice of the somniant, but the deep, grinding sorrow of something immensely old being torn from its rest. They found the source in a high-security chamber. The room was a clash of worlds. Banks of sleek computers and spectral analyzers hummed alongside dream capture crystals the size of tombstones. In the center, under a cage of glowing amber light, lay the clay tablets. But they were no longer inert. They bled dream stuff, a continuous stream of grainy, ochre dust that was sucked into Boreal's crystals and scanners. Boreal himself stood before a holographic display, decoding the stream into shimmering lines of cuneiform text that twisted like living things. He didn't look like a madman. He looked like a scientist on the verge of the greatest discovery of his life. Stop, Caspian. Wraith's voice cut through the hum. You're not reading it. You're flaying it. Boreal turned, not surprised. Alistair, and the prodigy. I wondered when sentiment would override sense. His gaze was cool, analytical. You call it flaying. I call it necessary dissection. The lithosnosis is the operating system of human consciousness. Buried, fragmented, useless. I am compiling it. Imagine the applications. Curing psychic ailments at their root. Creating stable shared dreamscapes for therapy, communication. You're causing the ailments. Lira shot back, gesturing to the bleeding tablets. This dissection is leaking into the dreams of everyone for blocks. You're giving people nightmares from the dawn of time. A temporary side effect. Boreal waved a dismissive hand. The birth pangs of a new understanding. Somnium hoards knowledge, Alistair. It whispers to a chosen few. I will broadcast it to the world. You'll shatter the world, Wraith said, stepping forward, his own silver resonance rising to counter the room's oppressive ochre. The human mind evolved with these dreams buried deep for a reason. They are the foundations. Expose them and the entire structure becomes unstable. You're not building a new understanding. You're triggering a psychic extinction event. For a flicker, doubt crossed Boreal's face. Then it hardened into resolve. Risk is inherent in progress. I will not be swayed by the superstitions of keepers and keys. This knowledge is humanity's inheritance. I am its executor. He raised a hand. The dream capture crystals flared, and the streaming ochre dust coalesced into forms. Not somniants, but eidolons. Semi-solid, mindless guardians shaped from the lithic dream stuff itself. Towering, simplified human figures with blank tablet faces, moving with a terrible, grinding slowness. They were the immune system of the old dream, attacking the perceived infection. Wraith and Lira. Go! Wraith shouted, spinning his umbrella. It unfolded into a shimmering shield of silver energy, holding back the advancing eidolons. Their touch made the shield crackle and spit chips of dreamstone. Do what you came for. I'll hold them. Lira didn't hesitate. She darted past the confrontation, towards the bleeding tablets. Boreal moved to intercept, but a whip of silver light from Wraith's free hand wrapped around his ankle, yanking him off balance. Lira reached the tablet array. The psychic noise was deafening. The screams of the first cities, the terror of the first storms, the raw, unfiltered awe of early humans looking at the stars. It was beautiful and horrifying. This was the pattern not as a story but as the feeling of story. She pulled out Kale's labyrinth device and activated it. It glowed with the soft green silver of the Sylvis Codex. She placed it on the central tablet not to capture the stream, but to offer an alternative. She opened her mind, as she had for the library, for Kale, for Leo. She didn't try to take. She offered the Codex as a sanctuary. You are being hurt, she thought at the raging dream stuff. Come with me, to a place of growing things, of quiet understanding. A place where you can be remembered, not ripped apart. For a moment, the chaotic stream resisted. Then, sensing the gentleness of the invitation, it shifted. The ochre torrent pulling into Boreal's machines thinned. A new golden ochre stream branched off, flowing into the labyrinth device. In the distant Somnium library, Lira would be seeing the Sylvis Codex erupt with a new, mighty root, drinking in the ancient knowledge. Boreal saw it on his monitors. "No!" he roared, breaking free from Wraith's tether. He lunged not at Lira, but at the device, a dagger of concentrated dream disruption energy in his hand. Wraith was there. He parried the dagger strike with his umbrella, but the force of Boreal's desperation, amplified by the chamber's energy, was immense. The umbrella, a focus for his power for a century, shattered. The backlash was silent and devastating. A wave of concussive dream force threw everyone back. The eidolons dissolved into dust. The machines shorted out in a shower of sparks. Lira scrambled up, seeing Wraith on the ground near the wall, not moving. The siphon was complete. The labyrinth device was dark, its purpose fulfilled. The tablets were now inert, just old clay. The lithosnosis was safe in the codex. Boreal stood amidst the wreckage, his suit torn, his face a mask of utter devastation. He wasn't looking at Lira or his ruined equipment. He was staring at the dead tablets. All that power, that knowledge, gone. Not stolen, but transcended. His life's work had vanished into a tree in a dream library. You've made it into another secret, he whispered, the fanaticism gone, leaving only hollow emptiness. Another thing for the keepers to guard. Lira ignored him, rushing to Wraith. He was breathing, but faintly. His eyes were open, looking at the cracked ceiling. When he saw her, he smiled, a tired, peaceful smile. Mother would be proud, he rasped. You didn't just save it. You gave it a home. Cough racked him. The umbrella was a crutch, a focus. I've been leaning on it too long. Don't talk, Lira said, tears blurring her vision. We need to get you back. Last lesson, librarian adjutant, he said, his voice growing fainter. He reached up, his hand cold, and touched her forehead. Not a weave of power, but a transfer of pure, unstructured understanding. A lifetime of walking the borders between worlds, the quiet joys, the hidden paths, the feel of London's dream reign. It was his final report. The world is always cracking. Our job is not to seal it forever. It's to mend it with the right thread. You have the thread. His hand fell. Alistair Wraith, the last guardian of the old Somnium, was gone. Not killed by a monster, but spent in the defense of a fragile ancient peace. Lira knelt there, holding his hand, the weight of his legacy and his final gift settling into her soul. She felt no explosion of new power, only a deep, calm clarity. She knew the secret ways. She understood the cost. She stood, turning to Boreal. He hadn't moved. The knowledge is not a secret, she said, her voice steady with a new authority. It's in the Silvus Codex in the heart of Somnium, accessible to any who approach with respect, not a drill. You are welcome to visit, Professor, as a scholar, not an excavator. She didn't wait for his answer. She picked up the spent labyrinth device and Wraith's broken umbrella. Then, with the simple, effortless grace Wraith had just taught her, she folded the space around her and stepped out of the museum, out of London, and back into the dreaming halls of home. She emerged in the library, at the foot of the Silvus Codex. It was transformed. A massive, beautiful root of golden stone now formed its base, pulsing with serene, ancient power. Lyra stood beside it, one hand on the root, tears of wonder on her cheeks. Kale and Alara arrived seconds later, breathless from maintaining the diversion. They saw Lira, saw the broken umbrella, saw her face. They understood. Somnium had lost its headmaster, but it had gained its foundation. And Lira Corvus, the girl from the tunnel, the tailor, the key, the librarian, now carried in her mind the last lesson and the first map. She looked at her friends, at the healed library, at the tree that now held the world's oldest dream safe within its new growth. The work continues, she said softly, and they knew as she did that it always would. End of episode 12, finale. Epilogue, The Growing Light. A year later, the Council of Elders had wanted a traditional election, a legacy from an old family. The students and the younger faculty, led by a vocal Alara and a quietly persuasive Kale, had other ideas. Tradition had nearly doomed them. They needed a new kind of leader. Lira Corvus stood on the dais in the great hall, not in formal robes, but in a simple, practical coat. Before her, on a cushion, lay the two halves of Alistair Wraith's broken umbrella, mended with bands of silver dream stuff, a symbol of continuity, not of broken power. Professor Phantasma, now the acting senior elder, held the circlet of Ethelred, not a crown, but a simple band of woven dreamvine. The circle of elders recognizes the will of the community, she said, her dreaming voice clear in the hush. Do you, Lira Corvus, vow to tend the dreams of this place, to mend its cracks, to guard its gates, and to teach its secrets to those who will listen with respect? Lyra's gaze swept the room. She saw Lyra proud and serene. She saw Kale, a permanent warden now, his scar no longer a mark of loss but a badge of honor. She saw Alara, beaming. She saw the faces of new students, foundlings and legacies alike, their eyes wide with hope, not fear. I do, Lira said, her voice carrying to the back of the hall without effort. And do you vow? Phantasma continued, a twinkle in her ancient eye. To remember that you are a librarian first, and that the best stories are those that are shared? A soft laugh rippled through the crowd.
Lira similet. Ido.
Phantasma placed the circlet on her head. It was light, felt not like a burden, but like a direction. Then rise, Lira Corvus, head librarian of Somnium. The title was new. The role was new. It was not about ruling, but about curating. Not about wielding power, but about facilitating understanding. Later, she stood with Kale on their balcony overlooking the font. The Silvus Codex glowed softly in the library behind them. Somnium hummed with calm, purposeful energy. Boreal sent a letter, Kale said, handing her a crisp envelope. Formal request for a research visa. Lira opened it, scanned the precise, polite text. She smiled. Granted, with supervision. He can study the lithosnosis root. Under Lyra's eye, she looked at Kale. The world's cracks are still there. There will be other boreals. Other hungry things. Yes, Kale agreed, looking not at the problems, but at the strong, resilient dream around them. But we're better at mending now, and we're not alone. He was right. They had built something here. A new Somnium, not a hidden fortress, but a living library. A sanctuary for broken dreams and a nursery for new ones. A bridge between the waking and the sleeping world. Lira touched the mended umbrella at her belt, then the living vine on her brow. She was the sum of her legacy. Her mother's courage, Corvus's brilliance, Wraith's guardianship. But she was also her own creation. A dream tailor, a librarian, a friend. She looked out at the folds, at the gentle pulse of countless dreams, safe and thriving. The work continued, but for this one quiet moment, in the growing light of a new age for Somnium, it was enough. The end.